Here's a little shelf unit I'm doing for a client. So first of all, I'm taking a good look at it, and I see there's some chips and gouges that we want to take care of, and I know that there are some holes in it because this was previously hung on a wall apparently. I thought it was actually on top of a piece of furniture, which those holes would make sense. But maybe they supported it against the wall. Either way, we have some holes to patch. So first thing I'm doing is cleaning it. I did use a TSP cleaner from Dixie Belle called White Lightning, and now I'm just rinsing it off with regular water from the mister bottle. And then secondly, I'm going to get at those repairs, and I'm using some LiQWYD because on top I feel like it's a job that requires something a little bit more sturdy than the regular Dixie mud that I usually use. I'm going to be using that a little bit too, but the LiQWYD you can actually get at the dollar store, I believe, as well as in the hardware store, and you just mix the two parts together. It's like an epoxy. And it's, they call it steel, but it works on wood, and it just hardens to a real shiny finish, similar to the look of steel, and then you can sand it. So I am using mud on some of the smaller holes, and I do like that LiQWYD because it doesn't stink too bad as well. So here where there's holes, I'm going to use a mold. So this is an older mold. It's a lock, and I believe it's a first generation IOD. I am dusting the mold with cornstarch. I always keep a box of cornstarch with a brush in it just for that purpose. You just put some in there and just shake out the excess. And then I'm using paper clay, and this is DOS paper clay. And you can get that at the craft store. And I'm just shaking out the excess cornstarch and then filling the mold. You remove any of the excess clay from the sides of the mold by pushing outward with your thumb. That's how I do it anyway. And then actually with these older ones, the newer ones have what's called a micro rim, and you can just run like a credit card over the top of it to flatten it. But the older ones, I kind of then push them back in. So you will see that's what I'm doing here, is I'm just kind of pushing clay back into that mold. And now I'm just going to flip it and gently peel it out of the mold. Voila, it's beautiful. So I'm using Titebond glue here, and I'm gonna glue that on to over that little hole. Now I prefer to use Titebond Thick and Quick, but I didn't have any. This is the premium, and it's a good glue. Everything aligned properly for this mold to go on nicely. You want to take the glue the whole way to the edge. And I'm just positioning it over the opening. The largest part is over the opening, the little keyhole part. And I'm cleaning up the edges with a little bit of wet paper towel, just so I don't have those gobs of glue that are going to interfere with my little design. So I'm just taking a minute to do that. It's these little details that are going to really make a difference once the painting starts. And I'm doing one for the opposite side. Here I'm doing a third mold, and this one's going to go on the top of the piece. I don't need to cover anything up, but I just think we need some balance. And again, I believe this is a first generation IOD mold. It's the same kind of thing, only it's meant to go behind handles on your piece, furniture, because it has a little hole in the middle. So like this has a hole in the middle, and the key locks, I don't necessarily want those features, so I may cover those up with a little gem later. But for now, we're just going to apply the mold. And here's where I really wish I had the Type On Thick and Quick glue, because my mold, as you'll see, or my casting, is kind of sliding down. So I measure to see what's center. Hold my finger in the air. Does anybody else do that? Finally, I decided to use my nail to mark it. There we go. But I am putting the mold on there. But as you'll see, it sort of slips down because it's on a vertical surface. So I end up using some tape, as you'll see, which is fine. But using that Thick and Quick, you will see what an amazing job that does. I don't know, if we put this in slow-mo, you could probably see that, or maybe if we sped it up, I'm not sure, but you could see it slide just as I'm getting the tape ready. So I have to do this carefully, so I put it at the bottom first, and then I kind of stick it to the surface only underneath the mold, because I don't want to press in and distort the mold. So then the rest I'm just kind of taking up to the top of the molding on the piece of furniture. So if that makes any sense, all I'm saying is just don't squish the mold, but press in underneath the mold to get the tape to hold it, and then just carry the tape up to the top of the piece. So anyway, tape it in place till it's dry. Okay, now it's time to have some fun. I check on my molds, everything's dry, the glue's all dry, and also the JB area that I filled in is dry, and it's not tacky or anything, so I can move on to sanding, and then we can have some fun with the rest of it. So everything looks good. I give everything a wipe down, and then I flip the piece over so I can get started and paint those shelves in the middle. I thought that was the best place to start, and basically I end up painting the whole piece this way. If you look up at the top of the screen, I actually poured some paint in to get started, and that may be a little unconventional, but hey, that's how I roll, at least this morning. So I continue to work and paint because I'm going to do a blend. So I'm going to stop about here. And then the color I was using was Caviar from Dixie Belle, and now I'm using Rustic Red. I'm using a palette knife and a color called Mermaid Tail. I just want to add a little interest to this, and I'm adding it very sparingly all over, and you'll be surprised what an impact this makes. I'm going to use a couple colors, but I knew I wanted to have this color. And sorry, it's not all in the screen. We were looking at the lower left there that I put a little on the bottom shelf and now a little bit all over. And I really wanted to get that corner up at the top and just the details like that. So I'm drying that so I can move on and do another color. And I'm using the heat gun, and even if it bubbles a little bit, that's okay. We're going for a little bit of texture here. So my client and I discussed the details. She loves red, she loves black, she loves botanicals, she has sort of a boho vibe. So she likes very zen stuff, but we're going to change it up a little bit, give her some color, and keeping with those other things. Now I'm using Colonel Mustard and another palette knife, and again, just putting a spare amount of color, sparse amount, I guess you could say, of color in the details of this piece. Here I'm using some kudzu, which is probably my original favorite Dixie Belle color. I just love it because it looks like a vintage green. But this jar is about shot. It's dried up. So I am spraying some water in it, and I'm using a palette knife, and I am about to get some good crusty texture out of there. And doing the same thing, going real sparingly over some details. And I'm truly loving what's happening. I continue to add a little bit more of the kudzu color until I feel like I've got enough. I really love the way it looks on the black, so I'm pretty pleased with that. And here's just a general look at where we are right now with this piece. Meanwhile, I'm looking at some transfers, some stamps, and some other goodies to see where we go next while the piece dries, and that way my paint will be good and dry for transfers and whatever else we decide to do with this piece. So here we go, it's time for fun, and I start with some stamps from IOD, and I'm using some stamp pad from Ranger. It's Distress ink. I'm probably not going to use that on furniture anymore. This was fine, and I'll explain myself, but I have found that if I use waxes or sealers, that the ink will run or smear. But if that's the reason why, you'll see later how I seal it as I do. But interestingly enough, I have found, because I use these in our vintage forged earrings, that I can use watercolor over top of it and it doesn't run at all. So that's odd. Anyway, but from what I understand, Iron Orchid Designs ink is it's of a grade that it'll allow you to seal over it. I have an assortment of random transfers from all different makes that I am trying to use up, so I'm using them all here. On to the sides, and time for more stamping. So I went a little crazy and did a little more stamping and a little more transfers. And now I am sanding. I'm using a 320 grit, which is super fine, just to distress the transfers and to get rid of any halos and to make all of the stamping, just all of it appear kind of nice and distressed and cohesive. And now I'm taking a paper towel that I've misted some water, and I'm just wiping all the dust off of it and getting it ready to seal. Before I seal it, I want to give it a little more depth and drama by using some glaze. And I'm using Dixie Belle's Grunge glaze. And I'm putting it in the corners and in the details of the molding, and also on the molds that I put on, especially in those, to get in all those detailed areas. And I'm just brushing it into the details, and then I'm just using a paper towel and just kind of blotting it off. In this application, that's my method of doing it. If I were working on something that I was going to that had a finer finish, I would definitely brush the glaze all over it and wipe it back a little at a time. But for this application, it's just kind of cool to put the shadows and the different areas. So just working it that way and blotting it. I left this in because I got a kick out of it. I was holding the can to the camera, but I didn't hold it still. But anyway, I'm using Krylon's matte finish, And of course I'm well ventilated. So all along I kept thinking that this piece needed some feet. So I remembered some feet that I had ordered back when we did a collaboration for the Halloween challenge, and I didn't use them for that piece. They just didn't work. So I ended up I had them, and then it dawned on me as I was working on this piece, they would be ideal for it. Well, boy, they sure were. They absolutely were made for it. They fit exactly on the piece. So I couldn't be more thrilled with how these turned out. Now I did edit some of the video out where I was really struggling with getting these on. So remember what it looked like? And check it out now. Thank you so much for watching today. If you like this video, how about giving it a thumbs up and also share it with your friends? If you haven't subscribed, you'll want to do that so you don't miss anything. Visit us at LiVintageDecor.company, and on Instagram we're LiVintageDecor, and on Facebook we're LiVintageDecor Altoona. Stay well.